The dusty streets of Pendleton, Oregon smelled of horse sweat and burning sage as Rebecca Jane carefully stumbled over her own skirts, dropping the book she had been reading behind the general store into the mud puddle at her feet. She let out a perfectly practiced squeal of dismay, watching as the volume of Shakespeare sank into the brown water, knowing full well that her father would have her hide for ruining yet another text. But it was worth it if it meant Thomas Crawford would finally stop looking at her like she might sprout horns and recite Latin verses at the Sunday social. The year was 1878, and Rebecca had learned the hard way that men in this corner of Oregon did not want wives who could discuss philosophy or debate the merits of westward expansion. They wanted women who could cook, clean, bear children, and look pretty while doing it. At 22 years old, Rebecca had watched every friend from her childhood marry and start families while she remained stubbornly single, her father growing more desperate with each passing season. The problem, as her mother had delicately put it before she died 3 years prior, was that Rebecca had inherited her grandfather's mind. Sharp, analytical, hungry for knowledge in a way that made people uncomfortable. She had spent her childhood reading every book she could get her hands on, learning mathematics from her schoolteacher when the other girls were learning embroidery, and asking questions that made the reverend clear his throat and change the subject. But that was before she realized what it cost her, before she understood that being clever was seen as being difficult. Before Thomas Crawford, the banker's son and most eligible bachelor in Pendleton, had courted her for exactly 2 weeks before telling her father that she was too opinionated for his taste, so Rebecca had made herself smaller, simpler. She practiced laughing at jokes she did not find funny, pretending confusion at things she understood perfectly well, and biting her tongue until it bled during conversations where she desperately wanted to contribute. She let her father believe she had finally grown out of her peculiar phase, and she waited for a man to find her suitable enough to marry. The general store door opened behind her, and Rebecca prepared her most helpless expression, but it was not Thomas Crawford who emerged. Instead, a tall stranger with dust on his boots and a worn leather saddlebag over his shoulder stepped into the afternoon sunlight, his eyes the color of the forest after rain. "You dropped your book," he said, his voice rough like whiskey and smoke. Rebecca looked down at the ruined Shakespeare, then back up at the stranger. "Oh, I am afraid it is quite beyond saving. How clumsy of me." The man bent down and retrieved the book anyway, wiping the mud from the cover with surprising care. He looked at the title, then at Rebecca, and something shifted in his expression. "Hamlet, that is an ambitious read for a Tuesday afternoon." Rebecca felt her cheeks flush. "I was not actually reading it. I found it in the store and was just looking at the pictures." She forced a giggle that sounded false even to her own ears. The stranger raised one eyebrow, a gesture that managed to convey both skepticism and amusement. "Pictures? In Hamlet?" "Yes, well." Rebecca reached for the book, but he held it just out of reach, studying her face with an intensity that made her want to squirm. "The lady doth protest too much, I think," he quoted, his lips quirking into something that might have been a smile. "That is from Hamlet too, in case you did not know." "I know," Rebecca said before she could stop herself, then immediately wished she could snatch the words back. I think I have heard someone say that before, somewhere." The stranger finally handed her the book, but his eyes never left her face. "Vincent Rourke," he said, extending his hand. "I just bought the old Morrison Ranch about 10 miles north of here." Rebecca hesitated, then shook his hand, feeling the calluses on his palm, the strength in his grip. "Rebecca Jane, my father owns the smithy on Main Street." "Pleasure to meet you, Miss Jane." Vincent tipped his hat, a gesture so old-fashioned and courteous that it made something in Rebecca's chest tighten. "I hope you enjoy the pictures in your book." He walked away before she could respond, leading his horse down the street toward what she assumed was the hotel. Rebecca stood there, holding the muddy Shakespeare, feeling off balance in a way she could not quite name. That evening, she sat at the dinner table across from her father, pushing beef stew around her plate while he read the local newspaper and grunted occasionally at the headlines. "There is a new rancher in town," Rebecca ventured, trying to sound casual. "Vincent Rourke. He bought the Morrison place." Her father looked up, his weathered face creasing with interest. "Morrison finally sold. About time. That man let that ranch go to seed after his wife passed. This Rourke fellow, he seemed capable. I only spoke to him briefly." Rebecca took a sip of water. "He seemed educated." "Educated does not mean much out here," her father said, returning to his paper. "What matters is if he can work the land. Speaking of which, Thomas Crawford asked about you at the smithy today." Rebecca's stomach sank. "Did he?" "Said he has been seeing you at church lately. Thought you looked mighty pretty last Sunday." Her father peered at her over the top of his newspaper. "You could do worse than the banker's son, Rebecca. I am not getting any younger, and I would like to know you are settled before I am gone." "Papa, you are healthy as a horse." "I am 56 years old with a bad back and worse knees," he countered. "Thomas is a good man with good prospects. Maybe you should encourage his attention a bit more." Rebecca nodded, saying nothing, feeling the weight of expectation settle over her shoulders like a yoke. She had tried to interest Thomas once before. She knew how that story ended. The next Sunday, Rebecca wore her best dress to church, a pale blue cotton that her mother had made the year before she died. She sat in the fourth pew, hands folded demurely in her lap, eyes downcast in a way that she hoped looked pious rather than bored. The Reverend droned on about temperance and the evils of gambling, and Rebecca let her mind wander, solving mathematical equations in her head to pass the time. She was mentally calculating the square root of 729 when she felt someone slide into the pew beside her. She glanced over and found Vincent Rourke sitting there, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt, his hair still damp from washing. "Miss Jane," he whispered, nodding politely. Rebecca felt several pairs of eyes turn toward them, including Thomas Crawford's from across the aisle. She smiled at Vincent, a small, careful smile, then turned her attention back to the Reverend. After the service, as people milled about outside in the sunshine, Vincent approached her again. "Might I walk you home, Miss Jane? I am still learning my way around town, and I could use a guide." Before Rebecca could answer, Thomas materialized at her elbow, his expression pleasant but his eyes cold. "Miss Jane has already agreed to let me escort her home today. Have you not, Rebecca?" Rebecca looked between the two men, feeling trapped. Thomas was the safe choice, the expected choice. Vincent was a stranger who looked at her like he could see through her carefully constructed facade. "Actually," she heard herself say, "I promised my father I would come straight home to help with the Sunday meal preparations." Both men looked disappointed, but Vincent recovered first. "Then perhaps another time. Good day, Miss Jane." He tipped his hat and walked away, and Rebecca watched him go with something that felt dangerously close to regret. Thomas cleared his throat. "You have been looking well lately, Rebecca. Less serious than you used to be." "Thank you, Thomas." Rebecca forced herself to smile at him. "That is kind of you to say. I was thinking we might take a drive next Saturday afternoon. There is a nice spot by the river that is pleasant this time of year." Rebecca knew what taking a drive meant. It meant courtship. It meant Thomas was serious about her, which meant marriage might follow. It meant security, stability, everything her father wanted for her. "That would be lovely," she said, and tried to mean it. The week passed slowly. Rebecca helped her father at the smithy, mending tools and keeping the books in order. She was good with numbers, had always been good with them, but she made sure to ask her father to check her work, to pretend she was unsure about calculations that she could do in her sleep. On Wednesday afternoon, Vincent Rourke came into the smithy leading a horse with a loose shoe. Rebecca was in the back room, cataloging inventory, but she could hear his voice through the open door. "I need this mare Rashad," Vincent was saying, "and I am looking for someone who can repair a broken axle on my wagon, snapped clean through on the drive up from California." "I can do both," her father said. "Have the mare ready by tomorrow, but the axle will take a few days. Got to order the right wood from the mill." "That is fine. I am not going anywhere." There was a pause, then Vincent asked, "You are Rebecca Jane's father, are you not?" Rebecca froze, straining to hear. "I am. You have met my daughter, briefly, at the general store. She seemed like a nice young lady." "She is," her father said, and Rebecca could hear the pride in his voice mixed with something else. Worry, maybe. "Smart as a whip, too, though she does not like to show it. Her mother was the same way. Too clever for her own good, people used to say." "I would think being clever is a good thing," Vincent said carefully. Her father laughed, but it was not a happy sound. "You would think so." But Rebecca learned the hard way that men do not want to marry women who are smarter than they are. Nearly 30 years old and still single because she could not keep her opinions to herself. Finally seems to have figured out that being right is not as important as being married. Rebecca felt her face burn with shame and anger. She was 22, not nearly 30, but she supposed to her father it might as well be the same thing. An old maid either way. "That seems like a shame," Vincent said, and Rebecca heard something in his voice she could not quite identify. "Wasting a good mind just to seem marriageable. That is the way of the world," her father said with finality. "Now, let me take a look at that mare." Rebecca stayed in the back room until Vincent left, then emerged to find her father examining a set of worn horseshoes. "Vincent Rourke seems like a decent man," she said, trying to sound casual. Her father grunted. "Seems so, asked about you." "Did he?" Rebecca's heart beat faster. "Do not get any ideas," her father said sharply. "You have got Thomas Crawford interested again. That is where you should put your focus. Rourke is starting from nothing out on that ranch. He will need years to build it up into something profitable. Thomas can give you a comfortable life right now." "I know, Papa. Do you?" Her father looked at her, really looked at her, and Rebecca saw the fear there. Fear that she would die alone, that he would fail in his duty to see her settled. "I want you to be happy, Rebecca. But more than that, I want you to be secure. When I am gone, you will need a husband to take care of you." "I can take care of myself," Rebecca said quietly. "That is exactly the kind of talk that will have you ending up alone," her father snapped. "Now, are you still planning on that drive with Thomas on Saturday?" "Yes, Papa." "Good, wear the blue dress. It suits you." Saturday arrived too quickly. Rebecca dressed in the blue cotton, pinned her dark hair up in a simple style, and waited on the porch for Thomas to arrive with his buggy. The afternoon was warm, the sky a cloudless expanse of blue that seemed to stretch forever. Thomas pulled up precisely on time, helping her into the buggy with practiced ease. He was handsome in a conventional way, with sandy hair and regular features, and he came from one of the wealthiest families in Pendleton. Rebecca knew she should feel grateful for his attention. They drove out of town in relative silence, Thomas commenting occasionally on the weather or the crops. Rebecca made appropriate responses, letting him lead the conversation, never disagreeing or offering her own observations. The river spot was indeed pretty, a bend in the water where cottonwood trees provided shade and the current ran slow and peaceful. Thomas spread a blanket on the grass and helped Rebecca sit down, then proceeded to unpack a basket of food that his mother had clearly prepared. "This is nice," Rebecca said, because it was expected. "I thought so too." Thomas poured her a glass of lemonade. "Rebecca, I have been thinking about our future." Rebecca's stomach clenched. "Our future? You must know that I have been courting you with serious intentions." Thomas shifted closer, taking her hand. "I made a mistake before when we were younger. I let my pride get in the way of seeing what a good wife you would make." "Thomas, I do not know what to say." "Say yes," he said, smiling. "I am asking you to marry me, Rebecca. I can give you a good life. A house in town, servants to help with the work, security for your father in his old age. All I ask in return is that you be a proper wife. Modest, agreeable, someone I can be proud to have on my arm at social functions." Rebecca looked at their joined hands, at the picnic spread out before them, at the river flowing past without care for the human dramas playing out on its banks. She thought about her future stretching out in a series of days just like this one. Pleasant, appropriate, suffocating. "Thomas, you are very kind to ask me, but I need time to think about this." His smile faltered. "What is there to think about? You are not getting any younger, Rebecca. This might be your last good offer." The words stung because they might be true. Rebecca pulled her hand away. "Perhaps, but I still need time." Thomas's face hardened. "I heard you have been seen talking to that new rancher, Vincent Rourke." "I have spoken to him once or twice, briefly." "He has nothing," Thomas said bluntly. "That ranch is mortgaged to the hilt. He will be lucky if he does not lose everything in the first year. Is that the kind of life you want? Scraping by, working yourself to the bone?" "I have not thought about any kind of life with Vincent Rourke," Rebecca said, which was not entirely true. "But I cannot give you an answer today, Thomas. I am sorry." The drive back to town was tense and uncomfortable. Thomas left her at her door without his usual polite farewell, and Rebecca went inside feeling shaken and confused. Her father took one look at her face and asked, "What happened?" "Thomas proposed." "That is wonderful." Her father's face lit up. "When is the wedding?" I did not say yes. The light died. "Rebecca, why on earth not?" "Because I do not love him," she said, the words bursting out before she could stop them. "Because he wants me to be something I am not. Because the thought of spending the rest of my life pretending to be simple and agreeable makes me want to scream." Her father stared at her, then slowly sat down in his chair. "You sound like your mother." "Is that so terrible?" "Your mother was the smartest woman I ever met," he said quietly. "Also the unhappiest. She felt trapped her whole life, like the world was too small for her mind. I do not want that for you, Rebecca. I thought if you could just learn to hide it, to fit in, you would be happier than she was." Rebecca knelt beside his chair. "I know you are trying to protect me, Papa, but I do not think I can marry Thomas. I would rather be alone than live a lie." Her father touched her cheek, his hand rough and warm. "Then do not marry him. But know that you are choosing a harder path. The world is not kind to unmarried women." "I know." That night, Rebecca could not sleep. She lay in bed, watching shadows move across the ceiling, thinking about her mother. She had died when Rebecca was 19, slowly fading from a fever that the doctor could not cure. In her final days, she had been delirious, talking to people who were not there, reciting poetry in 3 languages. "Do not be like me," she had whispered to Rebecca during a lucid moment. "Find someone who loves all of you, not just the parts that are convenient." Rebecca had not understood then. She thought any love would be enough. But now, facing the prospect of marrying Thomas, she finally grasped what her mother meant. The next morning, Rebecca decided to take a walk to clear her head. She told her father she was going to gather wildflowers, which was not entirely untrue, and set out toward the hills north of town. The day was already growing hot, the sun beating down on the dry earth, but Rebecca did not mind. She needed space to think, to breathe, to be herself without anyone watching. She had walked for perhaps an hour when she saw the ranch house in the distance. The Morrison place, she realized, which meant it was Vincent Rourke's place now. She should turn back, should not risk being seen anywhere near a single man's property, but her feet kept moving forward as if they had a mind of their own. As she got closer, she could see Vincent working in the corral, training a young horse on a lead line. He moved with patient confidence, his voice low and soothing as he guided the skittish animal in circles. He had not noticed her yet, and Rebecca stood at the fence, watching him work. The horse was beautiful, a dappled gray with intelligent eyes and a nervous disposition. Vincent never raised his voice, never jerked the lead, just kept up a steady stream of encouragement until the horse began to relax and follow his commands. "He is a she, actually," Vincent called out, and Rebecca jumped, realizing she had been spotted. "And she is terrified of her own shadow, but she is learning." "She is beautiful," Rebecca said, moving closer to the fence. "What is her name?" "Has not got one yet. Just bought her off a man passing through town who said she was too flighty to train." Vincent brought the horse over to the fence. "I think she just needs someone patient enough to work with her." Rebecca reached out carefully, letting the horse sniff her hand before touching the soft nose. "I think you are right." Vincent secured the lead line and leaned against the fence beside her. "What brings you out this way, Miss Jane?" "You are a long way from town. I needed to think, to be somewhere I did not have to pretend." The words came out before Rebecca could censor them, and she felt her face flush. "I should not have said that." "Why not, if it is true?" Vincent studied her face. "What are you pretending to be?" Rebecca hesitated, then decided that she had nothing left to lose. "Someone simpler than I am. Someone agreeable and modest who does not have opinions about things that do not concern her. Someone men want to marry." "And is it working?" Thomas Crawford proposed yesterday. Something flickered across Vincent's face. "I see. Congratulations." "I did not accept." The flicker became something else, something warmer. "Why not?" "Because he does not want to marry me. He wants to marry the version of me that I have been performing for the past 3 years. And I realize that I cannot do it for the rest of my life. I would rather be alone." Vincent was quiet for a moment, watching the horse graze nearby. "Do you know what I see when I look at you, Miss Jane?" Rebecca shook her head, not trusting herself to speak. "I see someone trying very hard to dim her own light. When you dropped that book in the mud and claimed you were looking at the pictures, I knew you were lying. I could see it in your eyes. You had been reading that book, really reading it, thinking about it. And then you pretended you had not, because that is what you think you are supposed to do." "You do not understand what it is like," Rebecca said, her voice tight, "being too much of something no one wants. I understand better than you think." Vincent turned to face her fully. "My mother was a schoolteacher. Brilliant woman, fluent in 4 languages, could solve equations that made grown men weep. My father loved her for it, married her because of it, not in spite of it. They had 20 good years together before she died, and every day he told her that her mind was what he treasured most about her." Rebecca felt tears prick her eyes. "That is a beautiful story, but it is not common. Most men want wives who make them feel intelligent by comparison." "Then most men are fools." Vincent reached through the fence and gently took her hand. "Rebecca, I am not a wealthy man. That ranch house needs a new roof. Half my fences are falling down and I am mortgaged up to my eyeballs. I've got nothing to offer you except hard work and uncertainty. But if you would consider letting me court you properly, I promise you this: you will never have to pretend to be less than you are. Not with me." Rebecca looked at their joined hands, at his face, at the ranch spreading out behind him. She thought about Thomas Crawford's comfortable house in town. about security and social standing, and all the things her father wanted for her. Then she thought about spending the rest of her life being herself, fully and completely, with someone who valued her mind as much as any other part of her. "I would like that," she whispered. "I would like that very much." Vincent smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes and made him look younger. "Then maybe you could start by telling me what you really think about Hamlet. Because I have some opinions about that play, and I would love to hear yours." Rebecca laughed, feeling something loosen in her chest. "I think Hamlet is his own worst enemy. All that intelligence, all that education, and he spends the entire play paralyzed by indecision." "Exactly." Vincent's face lit up. "Thank you. Everyone always talks about it like it is some great tragedy, but really it is about a man who thinks too much and acts too late." They talked for 2 hours, leaning against the fence in the hot sun, about Shakespeare and politics, and the best methods for breaking horses and the astronomy book Rebecca had hidden under her mattress. Vincent challenged her ideas, disagreed with her occasionally, but never once made her feel like she should quiet down or defer to his opinion. When Rebecca finally realized how late it had gotten, she started to panic. "My father will be wondering where I am." "Let me ride you back to town," Vincent offered. "It is too far to walk and it will be dark soon." They rode together on his horse, Rebecca sitting sideways in front of him, his arms around her as he held the reins. It was improper, would cause talk if anyone saw them, but Rebecca found she did not care. For the first time in years she felt free. Vincent left her at the edge of town, not wanting to cause her trouble. "Can I see you again?" he asked. "Yes," Rebecca said without hesitation. "But I should talk to my father first. Tell him about Thomas, about you, about all of it. I understand. Whenever you are ready." Rebecca walked home feeling lighter than air, but when she opened the door, she found her father sitting in the dark, waiting. "Where have you been?" His voice was tight with worry and anger. "I went for a walk. I lost track of time. Thomas Crawford came by, said you rejected his proposal." Her father stood up, his face haggard in the lamplight. "Rebecca, what are you doing? I told you I could not marry him. And I told you that you are choosing a hard road." He crossed to her, gripping her shoulders. "I saw you ride in just now with Vincent Rourke. Do you have any idea what people will say?" "I do not care what people say." "Well, you should." Her father's voice rose. "Your reputation is all you have, Rebecca. Once it is gone, no decent man will have you." "Then maybe I will have an indecent one," Rebecca shot back. "Or maybe I will have no one at all. But I will not marry Thomas Crawford just to make you feel better about dying." Her father recoiled as if she had slapped him. "Is that what you think this is about? Is it not?" Rebecca felt tears streaming down her face. "You are so afraid of leaving me alone that you would marry me off to anyone with enough money and social standing, regardless of whether he actually values me as a person." "I want you to be safe," her father said, his own voice breaking. "Is that so wrong?" "No, but it is not enough." Rebecca wiped her eyes. "Mama told me to find someone who loved all of me, not just the convenient parts. I think Vincent Rourke might be that person, and I want the chance to find out." Her father sank back into his chair. "He has nothing, Rebecca. He has a ranch and a good heart and a mind that matches mine. That is more than Thomas Crawford ever offered me." They sat in silence for a long moment, the clock on the mantel ticking away the seconds. Finally, her father spoke, his voice tired and sad. "Your mother said the same thing about me when her father objected to our marriage. I was just a blacksmith's apprentice with no prospects. She could have married the mayor's son, but she chose me instead." He looked at Rebecca. "I have spent our entire marriage trying to be worthy of that choice. Sometimes I think I failed." "You did not fail, Papa. You loved her. That was all she ever wanted." She wanted more than I could give her, he said quietly. More than this town could give her. She died feeling trapped and unfulfilled, and I could not fix it. I thought if I could teach you to want less, to be satisfied with a comfortable life, you would not end up like her. But I am like her, Rebecca said gently. I cannot change that. I can only choose whether to honor it or bury it. Her father nodded slowly. If you want to pursue this thing with Rourke, I will not stand in your way, but I want to meet him properly. Have him come to dinner tomorrow night. Let me take his measure as a man. Thank you, Papa. The next morning, Rebecca walked out to Vincent's ranch, taking the long route through the hills to avoid being seen. She found him mending a section of fence, his shirt soaked with sweat despite the early hour. Rebecca, he said, straightening up with a smile, this is a pleasant surprise. My father wants to meet you. He has invited you to dinner tonight if you are free. Vincent's smile faded slightly. He knows about us, about yesterday. He saw us ride into town together. He was not pleased, but he is willing to give you a chance. Rebecca moved closer, touching his arm. I told him I want to see where this goes, between us. Are you sure? Vincent searched her face. Because once we start down this road, people will talk. Thomas Crawford will not take kindly to being rejected for a poor rancher. Your social standing might suffer. Let it suffer, Rebecca said firmly. I am tired of living my life according to what other people think I should do. Vincent pulled her close, and Rebecca melted into his embrace, feeling safe and seen in a way she never had before. Your mind is what I treasure, he murmured into her hair. I want you to know that. Not your cooking skills or your social graces or your ability to bear children. Those things might come, but what draws me to you is the way your mind works. The way you think and question and refuse to accept easy answers. Rebecca pulled back to look at him, her eyes bright with tears. No one has ever said anything like that to me before. Then everyone else has been a fool. He kissed her forehead. Now let me wash up and make myself presentable for your father. I want to make a good impression. That evening, Vincent arrived at the smithy at precisely 6 o'clock, carrying a bouquet of wildflowers and wearing what Rebecca suspected was his only good suit. Her father answered the door, looking Vincent up and down with an assessing gaze. Mr. Jane, Vincent said, extending his hand. Thank you for inviting me to dinner. Come in, her father said gruffly, shaking his hand. Rebecca has made a roast. The dinner was awkward at first, full of long silences and careful small talk. Rebecca served the food with trembling hands, watching her father watch Vincent, trying to read his reactions. Rebecca tells me you are from California, her father finally said, cutting into his beef. Yes, sir. I worked on a ranch down there for 10 years, saved every penny I could. When I heard the Morrison place was for sale, I saw an opportunity. Working on a ranch is different from owning one, her father observed. You have any experience running an operation? Some. I managed the breeding program for my last employer, handled all the purchasing and sales. Learned how to balance books, deal with suppliers, negotiate contracts. Vincent met her father's gaze steadily. I am not going into this blind, sir. I know it will be hard work and I know success is not guaranteed, but I am willing to do whatever it takes. And my daughter. Where does she fit into your plans? Vincent glanced at Rebecca, then back at her father. That depends on Rebecca. I would like to court her properly with your permission. I cannot promise her an easy life, but I can promise her an honest one, a partnership built on respect and affection. Respect and affection are fine, her father said, but they do not put food on the table. No, sir. Hard work does that, and I am not afraid of hard work. They continued eating in silence, and Rebecca felt her stomach twist with anxiety. Her father was not making this easy, but she supposed she should not have expected him to. Finally, Her father set down his fork and looked directly at Vincent. "Do you know what you are getting into with my daughter? She is not like other women. She has opinions, strong ones. She reads books that would make most men's heads spin. She will want to be part of decisions, not just accept whatever you tell her." "I know," Vincent said quietly. "That is what I love about her." Rebecca's heart stopped. It was the first time anyone had used that word, and the weight of it hung in the air between them. Her father studied Vincent for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "My wife was like Rebecca, brilliant, stubborn, impossible to ignore. I loved her more than my own life, but I could not give her the intellectual stimulation she needed. This town was too small for her mind. She died feeling like she had wasted her potential, and it broke my heart." He looked at Rebecca, his eyes sad. "I do not want that for you, daughter. If this man can give you what I could not give your mother, then you have my blessing." Rebecca felt tears slip down her cheeks. "Papa." "But," her father continued, turning back to Vincent, "if you hurt her, if you make her feel small or stupid or less than she is, I will come after you with the hottest iron in my forge. Are we clear?" "Crystal clear, sir." Vincent's voice was solemn. "I will do everything in my power to make her happy. See that you do." After dinner, Vincent walked Rebecca out onto the porch. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. "That went better than I expected," Vincent said, taking her hand. "My father liked you. He would not have given his blessing otherwise." "And what about you, Rebecca?" Vincent turned to face her, his expression serious. "Do you like me?" Rebecca laughed softly. "I'm more than like you. I think I might be falling in love with you, which is terrifying because we have known each other less than a month." "I fell in love with you the moment you dropped that book in the mud and tried to convince me you were looking at the pictures," Vincent said. "You are a terrible liar, by the way. Your eyes give you away every time." "That is good to know." Rebecca squeezed his hand. "What happens now? Now I court you properly. Take you on drives, come to Sunday dinners, make myself indispensable to your life. And if you will have me, maybe in a few months I will ask you to marry me." "I think I might say yes." Vincent kissed her then, soft and sweet, and Rebecca felt the last of her defenses crumble. She had spent 3 years trying to be someone she was not, and in the space of a few weeks, Vincent had shown her that she did not have to change. She just had to find the right person. Over the next 3 months, Vincent courted Rebecca with a determination that made her giddy. He came to town every Sunday for church, sitting beside her in the pew and walking her home afterward. He invited her to the ranch to help him with the books, and they spent hours going over ledgers and making plans for the future. Rebecca discovered that Vincent had not been exaggerating about the state of his finances. The ranch was deeply in debt, and making the monthly payments required careful budgeting and constant work. But Vincent approached it all with good humor and persistence, rising before dawn to mend fences and breaking horses to sell at market. Rebecca helped where she could, offering suggestions for increasing efficiency and cutting costs. Vincent listened to every idea, implementing the ones that made sense and explaining why others would not work. It was the kind of partnership Rebecca had always dreamed of, where her intelligence was valued rather than hidden. Thomas Crawford stopped speaking to her entirely, which Rebecca considered a blessing. The other young women in town treated her with a mixture of pity and bewilderment, unable to understand why she would choose a struggling rancher over the banker's son. Rebecca did not bother trying to explain, but there were allies too. The Reverend's wife, a sharp-eyed woman named Martha, pulled Rebecca aside one Sunday and said, "Good for you, dear. I always thought Thomas Crawford was duller than dishwater. Your young man actually has a brain in his head." And the school teacher, a spinster named Grace, told her, I wish I had been brave enough to choose passion over propriety when I was your age. Do not let anyone make you doubt your decision." The support, however small, meant more to Rebecca than she could say. In early December, as the first snow began to fall over Pendleton, Vincent asked Rebecca to come to the ranch. She found him waiting by the corral, the dappled gray mare he had been training standing calmly beside him. "I finally gave her a name," Vincent said, stroking the mare's neck. "I call her Athena, goddess of wisdom, seemed appropriate." "I love it," Rebecca said, moving to pet the horse. Athena nuzzled her hand, no longer skittish and nervous but calm and trusting. "She reminds me of you," Vincent continued. "Beautiful and intelligent, just needing someone patient enough to see it." He took Rebecca's hands, his expression serious. "I know I said I would wait a few months before asking this, but Rebecca, I cannot imagine my life without you anymore. Every decision I make, I think about how it will affect our future. Every dream I have, you are in it." Rebecca's heart began to race. "Vincent." He dropped to one knee in the snow, still holding her hands. "I know I cannot give you the life Thomas Crawford could. We will have to work hard, save carefully, build everything from nothing. But I can promise you that you will never have to hide who you are with me. Your mind, your opinions, your fierce intelligence, those are the things I treasure most about you. Will you marry me, Rebecca? Will you be my partner in every sense of the word?" "Yes," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, absolutely yes." Vincent stood and swept her into his arms, kissing her deeply while Athena whinnied her approval. When they finally broke apart, both laughing and crying, Vincent pulled a simple gold band from his pocket. "It was my mother's," he said, sliding it onto Rebecca's finger. "My father wanted me to have it to give to someone worthy of it. I think you are exactly who he would have chosen." Rebecca looked at the ring, simple and worn but perfect. "I will treasure it." They were married in February of 1879, in a small ceremony at the church with her father and a handful of friends in attendance. Rebecca wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her, and carried a bouquet of dried wildflowers. Vincent wore his good suit and looked at her like she hung the moon. The reverend kept the ceremony short, mindful of the cold, and when he pronounced them man and wife, Vincent kissed Rebecca with such joy that several people in attendance actually applauded. The wedding breakfast was held at the hotel, a simple affair with sandwiches and cake that Rebecca had baked herself. Her father made a toast, his voice thick with emotion. "To my daughter and her new husband. May you find the happiness that her mother and I had, and may you build a life together based on honesty and respect. Rebecca, your mother would be so proud of the woman you have become. Vincent, welcome to the family." Rebecca hugged her father tightly, feeling him tremble. "Thank you, Papa, for everything. Be happy," he whispered. "That is all I ever wanted for you." Moving to the ranch was an adjustment. The house was small and drafty, the roof leaked in 3 places, and the stove had a temperamental personality that required coaxing. But Rebecca threw herself into making it a home, sewing curtains from old flour sacks and planting herbs in the kitchen window. Vincent taught her to ride properly, and soon she was spending her days helping him around the ranch. She learned to mend fences, tend the vegetable garden, and keep the chickens from being eaten by foxes. Her hands grew calloused, her skin tanned from the sun, and she had never been happier. At night, they would sit by the fire, Vincent reading aloud from whatever book they were currently working through while Rebecca mended clothes or worked on the account books. Sometimes they would talk for hours, debating philosophy or politics, or the best method for training stubborn horses. Other times they would simply sit in comfortable silence, content in each other's presence. In June, Rebecca realized she was pregnant. She told Vincent over breakfast, watching his face transform from confusion to understanding to pure joy. A baby. He dropped his fork. We are going to have a baby in February if my calculations are correct. Vincent came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. I love you so much. You know that, right? I know, I love you too. The pregnancy was relatively easy, though Rebecca found herself exhausted in a way she had never been before. Vincent took over more of the ranch work, insisting she rest, but Rebecca refused to be idle. She continued helping with the books and managing the household, only slowing down in the final months when her belly made bending over difficult. Her father came to visit often, bringing supplies and checking on her health. He had aged noticeably in the past year, his bad back making it harder for him to work the forge, but his eyes lit up whenever he talked about becoming a grandfather. Have you thought about names? He asked one afternoon, sitting at their kitchen table while Rebecca kneaded bread. If it is a boy, we want to name him William after Vincent's father, Rebecca said. If it is a girl, maybe Caroline after Mama. Her father's eyes grew misty. Your mother would have loved that. The baby came on a snowy February night, 2 weeks earlier than expected. Vincent rode to town to fetch the midwife while Rebecca labored alone, gripping the bedpost and breathing through the contractions. The midwife, an experienced woman named Agnes, arrived just in time to deliver a healthy baby boy with a shock of dark hair and his father's green eyes. What a beautiful child, Agnes said, placing the baby in Rebecca's arms. Strong lungs, too, listen to him holler. Vincent returned from settling the horses to find his wife and son resting peacefully. He approached the bed with tears streaming down his face, touching the baby's tiny hand with one finger. Hello, William, he whispered. I am your father, and I am so happy to meet you. Rebecca watched her husband fall in love with their son, feeling her heart expand in ways she had not known were possible. This was what she had been missing all those years she spent pretending to be someone else. This was what real life felt like. William was a good baby, sleeping through the night by 3 months and smiling at everything and everyone. Rebecca discovered she loved being a mother, though it was more exhausting than any work she had ever done. But Vincent was a true partner, changing diapers and walking the floor with William when he was fussy, never acting like childcare was beneath him. When William was 6 months old, Rebecca's father had a heart attack while working at the forge. Vincent rode to town as fast as he could, but by the time he arrived, Rebecca's father had already passed. He died quickly, the doctor said. He probably did not suffer. Rebecca grieved deeply for the man who had raised her, who had loved her mother fiercely and tried his best to protect his daughter even when he did not fully understand her. They buried him next to Rebecca's mother in the Pendleton cemetery, and Rebecca planted wildflowers on both graves. I think they are together now, Vincent said, holding William while Rebecca knelt by the headstones. Your mother and father, finally able to talk about all the things they never had time for in life. I hope so, Rebecca said softly. I hope she forgives him for trying to change me. He only did it because he loved her so much and did not want me to hurt the way she did. I am sure she understands. Rebecca inherited her father's smithy, which they sold to a young blacksmith from Wyoming. The money helped them pay off a significant portion of the ranch mortgage, easing the financial pressure that had been weighing on them. The years passed in a rhythm of seasons and growth. William grew into a curious, intelligent child who asked endless questions and loved helping his father with the horses. Rebecca discovered she was pregnant again when William was 3. And this time she delivered a daughter they named Caroline Grace, honoring both Rebecca's mother and the schoolteacher who had encouraged her to be herself. Caroline was the opposite of her brother, quiet and observant where he was loud and boisterous. She would sit for hours watching the world around her, taking everything in with serious gray eyes. "She is going to be a philosopher," Vincent said, watching his daughter examine a butterfly with intense concentration. "Or a scientist," Rebecca suggested. "Look how methodically she is studying it." "Whatever she wants to be," Vincent said firmly, "that is what she will be. No one is going to tell my daughter that she has to hide her intelligence." By the time Caroline was 2, the ranch was finally showing a real profit. Vincent's careful breeding program had produced several exceptional horses that sold for good prices, and Rebecca's efficient management of the books had saved them money in countless small ways. They were able to build an addition onto the house, adding bedrooms for the children and a small library that filled with books. Rebecca started a lending library for the women of Pendleton, opening her collection to anyone who wanted to borrow books. She held informal discussion groups in her parlor once a month, where women could talk about what they had read without fear of being judged for having opinions. "You are creating exactly what your mother needed," Vincent told her, watching a group of women debate the merits of a novel. "A place where women can exercise their minds." "I wish she could have seen it," Rebecca said. "I think she can," Vincent said, pulling her close, "and I think she is proud of you." When William was 7 and Caroline 4, Rebecca gave birth to twin boys, which threw the household into happy chaos. Vincent hired a local girl to help with the children and the housework, giving Rebecca more time to focus on the library and the ranch accounts. Thomas Crawford married a quiet girl from a wealthy family in Portland and moved away from Pendleton, which Rebecca heard about through town gossip and did not care about in the slightest. The few times she thought about him, it was with a vague sense of gratitude that she had been smart enough to refuse him. Years continued to unfold in a tapestry of ordinary miracles. First steps, first words, teaching William to read and watching Caroline learn arithmetic with the same passion Rebecca had felt as a child. The twins, James and Samuel, were wild and adventurous, always getting into trouble but charming their way out of it. On their 10th wedding anniversary, Vincent took Rebecca on a picnic to the spot by the river where Thomas had proposed all those years ago. They sat on a blanket, watching the water flow by, their hands intertwined. "Do you ever regret it?" Vincent asked. "Choosing this life instead of an easy one?" Rebecca looked at him, at the gray beginning to show at his temples, at the laugh lines around his eyes, at the hands that had worked so hard to build their life together. "Not for a single moment," she said honestly. "This is exactly the life I was meant to have, with you." "Your mind is still what I treasure most," Vincent said, echoing the words he had spoken so many years ago. "Though I have to admit, I treasure a lot of other things about you too now." Rebecca laughed. "I treasure everything about you. Your patience, your kindness, the way you never once made me feel like I had to be less than I am." "You are the smartest person I know," Vincent said seriously, "and the best partner I could have asked for. Thank you for taking a chance on a poor rancher with nothing but a dream." "Thank you for seeing me," Rebecca whispered. "Really seeing me." They kissed as the sun set over the river, two people who had found each other against the odds and built something beautiful together. As William grew older, he showed an aptitude for veterinary medicine, often helping the local doctor with sick animals. Rebecca encouraged his interests, buying him medical textbooks and letting him practice on the ranch animals under supervision. Caroline, true to Rebecca's prediction, developed a passion for astronomy and mathematics. She would spend hours charting the stars, filling notebooks with calculations and observations. Vincent built her a small observatory in the barn, just a platform with a good telescope, and Caroline treated it like her own private kingdom. The twins were harder to pin down, their interests changing weekly. One month they wanted to be cowboys, the next, railroad engineers. Rebecca and Vincent let them explore, knowing they would find their passions eventually. When Rebecca turned 40, Vincent threw her a surprise party at the ranch, inviting everyone from town. The house overflowed with people, food, laughter, and music. Rebecca stood in the middle of it all, surrounded by her children and friends, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. Grace, the school teacher, now retired and in her 70s, pulled Rebecca aside. "I knew you would do something special with your life. I knew it from the first day you came to school and asked me why we could not learn the same things the boys did. You were the first person who told me my questions were important," Rebecca said, hugging the older woman. "I never forgot that. And you have passed that lesson on to your own children. That is what matters. Breaking the cycle." As the party wound down and guests began to leave, Rebecca stood on the porch with Vincent, watching the sun set over their land. The ranch was prosperous now, the mortgage paid off, the buildings maintained, the herds healthy. "We did it," she said softly. "We actually built something here." "We did," Vincent agreed, "and it is just the beginning. William wants to go to university to study veterinary medicine. Caroline is talking about applying to an academy for young women in San Francisco that focuses on sciences. Our children are going to have opportunities we never had. Because we gave them the freedom to be themselves," Rebecca said. "That is the greatest gift we could give them." Years continued to pass, each one bringing new challenges and joys. William went to university in Portland and returned as a qualified veterinarian, setting up a practice in Pendleton. He married a lovely young woman named Elizabeth, who shared his passion for animals, and they gave Rebecca her first grandchildren. Caroline did go to San Francisco, where she studied mathematics and physics. She wrote long letters home about her classes, her discoveries, her dreams of becoming a professor. Rebecca saved every letter, reading them over and over with pride. The twins eventually settled on ranching, working alongside Vincent to expand the operation. They bought the neighboring property and began raising cattle in addition to horses, turning the ranch into one of the most successful in the region. When Rebecca was 55, Vincent came down with pneumonia during a particularly harsh winter. For 2 weeks, Rebecca nursed him around the clock, barely sleeping, terrified that she would lose him. The doctor was pessimistic, but Rebecca refused to accept that possibility. "You are not leaving me," she told Vincent fiercely, spooning broth into his mouth. "We have got too much life left to live." Vincent recovered slowly, his strength returning day by day. When he was finally well enough to sit up and read again, he took Rebecca's hand and said, "I heard you. When I was at my worst, delirious with fever, I heard you telling me to stay. I stayed for you. I would have fought death himself to keep you here," Rebecca said, tears streaming down her face. "I know. That is why I am still here." On their 25th wedding anniversary, their children threw them a party that filled the ranch house to bursting. William and Elizabeth came with their 3 children. Caroline came home from San Francisco with news that she had been offered a teaching position at a women's college. The twins brought their respective sweethearts, both planning weddings for the following summer. Rebecca stood in the middle of the chaos, watching her family laugh and talk and argue good-naturedly, and felt a peace so profound it brought tears to her eyes. Vincent found her and pulled her into his arms. "What are you thinking about?" "I am thinking about the girl I used to be, pretending to be simple so that men would find me marriageable. I am thinking about how lost I felt, how trapped. And then I am thinking about everything that came after. You, this ranch, our children, this beautiful, complicated life we built together. Any regrets? Only that I wasted 3 years trying to be someone I was not. But if I had not done that, I might not have appreciated you when you came along. So maybe even that was necessary. Your mind is still what I treasure most, Vincent said, repeating the words that had become their private refrain over the years. And yours is what I treasure, Rebecca replied. Thank you for seeing me, for loving me, for giving me permission to be fully myself. Thank you for choosing me, Vincent said, for taking a chance on a poor rancher with more dreams than money. Best decision I ever made. They kissed as their children and grandchildren cheered, and Rebecca thought about her mother, buried in the Pendleton cemetery. She hoped her mother could see this, could see what her daughter had built. A life without pretense, without hiding, without shame. A life full of love and purpose, and the freedom to be exactly who she was. As the years continued to flow by like the river that ran through their land, Rebecca and Vincent grew old together with grace and humor. They watched their children build their own lives, make their own choices, create their own happiness. They held their grandchildren and later their great-grandchildren, passing on stories about the importance of being true to yourself. Caroline became a renowned mathematician, publishing papers that advanced the field and teaching generations of young women. William's veterinary practice grew to serve 3 counties. The twins turned the ranch into an empire, employing dozens of people and treating them all fairly. When Rebecca was 72, Vincent passed away peacefully in his sleep, his hand in hers. She grieved him deeply, feeling like half of herself had been torn away. But she also felt grateful for every moment they had shared, every conversation, every kiss, every ordinary day that had made up their extraordinary life together. She lived for another 8 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren, still sharp as a tack and twice as fierce. She continued to run the lending library, to have discussions with the women of Pendleton, to encourage young girls to pursue education and never hide their intelligence. On her deathbed, surrounded by 4 children, 12 grandchildren, and 7 great-grandchildren, Rebecca looked at the faces of the people she loved and felt at peace. "Mama," William said, holding her hand, "is there anything you want to say, any wisdom to pass on?" Rebecca smiled, thinking about the long journey from the girl who hid her books to the woman who had built a library. Never make yourself smaller to fit someone else's expectations. Find someone who treasures your mind as much as your heart. And most importantly, never stop questioning, learning, growing. That is what makes life worth living. Caroline leaned forward. "You gave me that gift, Mama, the courage to pursue knowledge even when people said it was not ladylike. I have passed it on to my students and they will pass it on to others. Your legacy will continue." "Good," Rebecca whispered. "That is what I hoped for." She died that night, quietly slipping away in her sleep. They buried her next to Vincent on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together, with a headstone that read, "Rebecca Jane Rourke. Beloved wife, mother, grandmother, her mind was treasured." The ranch continued to thrive under her children's management, growing and changing with the times, but always maintaining the values Rebecca and Vincent had instilled. The lending library became a permanent institution in Pendleton, eventually evolving into a proper public library with Rebecca's collection as its foundation. Caroline wrote a book about her mother's life, about the woman who had hidden her intelligence until she found someone who treasured it. The book inspired countless young women to pursue education, to refuse to make themselves smaller, to seek partnerships built on respect and genuine affection rather than social convention. Years after Rebecca's death, A young woman came to the library in Pendleton, looking for advice. She was engaged to a man who wanted her to quit her teaching job to focus on being a wife and mother. She was smart, ambitious, and torn between love and her sense of self. Caroline, visiting Pendleton for the anniversary of her mother's death, found the young woman crying in the stacks. She sat down beside her and told her the story of Rebecca Jane, the woman who had almost married for security until she found someone who valued her mind as much as any other part of her. "What did she choose?" the young woman asked. "She chose herself," Caroline said simply. "And in doing so, she found real love, not the kind that requires you to diminish yourself, but the kind that celebrates every part of who you are." The young woman thought for a long moment, then nodded. "I know what I need to do." She broke off her engagement and continued teaching. 2 years later, she met a man who loved that she was smarter than him, who asked her opinion on everything, who told her that her mind was what he treasured most. They married and had 4 children, all of whom went to university and pursued their passions. And that is how Rebecca's legacy continued, spreading out in ripples through generations. Every woman who refused to hide her intelligence, every man who treasured rather than feared a smart wife, every child raised to believe that knowledge was valuable regardless of gender. They were all carrying forward what Rebecca and Vincent had started in that small ranch in Oregon. The ranch itself stood for over 100 years, eventually being donated to the state as a historical site. Visitors could tour the house where Rebecca had raised her children, see the library she had built, read the letters between her and Vincent that spoke of intellectual partnership and genuine love. But more than the physical legacy, it was the idea that endured. The radical notion that women did not have to make themselves smaller to be loved. That intelligence was something to treasure, not hide. That true partnership meant celebrating each other's strengths rather than feeling threatened by them. Rebecca Jane had started out as a young woman so desperate to be married that she was willing to pretend to be someone she was not. She had ended as a matriarch whose influence touched hundreds of lives, whose courage to be herself had given others permission to do the same. And it all began with a muddy copy of Hamlet, a cowboy who saw through her act, and the simple declaration that her mind was what he treasured. Sometimes, Rebecca used to say in her later years, the most revolutionary act is simply being yourself and finding someone who loves you for it. That lesson, born in the Wild West of 1878, echoed through the decades that followed, a reminder that real love does not require you to be less than you are. It demands that you be fully, completely, unapologetically yourself. And when you find someone who treasures that, you hold onto them with both hands and build something beautiful together. The story of Rebecca and Vincent became the story of their children, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren, each generation adding their own chapter while maintaining the core truth. That love built on respect and authentic partnership is the foundation for everything good that follows. And somewhere, in whatever comes after this life, Rebecca and Vincent walked hand in hand, still talking, still debating, still treasuring each other's minds as much as they had on that first day when she dropped a book in the mud, and he saw through her pretense to the brilliant woman underneath. Their love story was not the fairy tale that society had tried to sell Rebecca in her youth. It was better. It was real. It was 2 people choosing to build something together, honoring each other's strengths, supporting each other through weaknesses, and never asking the other to be anything less than fully themselves. That was the legacy. That was the gift. That was the happily ever after that Rebecca Jane had found when she finally stopped hiding and started living. And it rippled out across time, touching lives, changing minds and proving that the Wild West had room for women who refused to be tamed, so long as they found partners who treasured their wildness rather than feared it.